Donald Trump says that any Jewish American who votes for Democrats hates their religion and hates Israel. Okay. The 2024 Republican nominee made those comments yesterday during a podcast interview. Take a listen.
Why do the Democrats hate Bibi Netanyahu?
I actually think they hate Israel.
Yes.
I don't think they hate him. I think they hate Israel. When you see those Palestinian marches, even I'm amazed at how many people are in those marches. And guys like Schumer see that. And to him, it's votes. I think it's votes more than anything else, because he was always pro-Israel. He's very anti-Israel now. Any Jewish person that votes for Democrats hates their religion. They hate everything about Israel, and they should be ashamed of themselves.
Gosh, speaking of being ashamed of themselves, my God, here's a guy that runs around and trashes the United States of America every day because he's not president. He trashes the United States of America before he is president, despite the fact that before and after the United States, as I say all the time, strongest economy in the world, easily, strongest militarily in the world, easily, the most soft power in the world, easily, the greatest institutions of higher learning, easily, the greatest medical doctors and healthcare professionals in the world, easily. You could go down the list. And yet, Gene Robinson, everything is personalized to Donald Trump. That's what happens in a cult. If he's not president of the United States and he says, America is horrible, America is awful, America is a joke, he says it. If you are a Jew and you don't support him, then you hate your religion and you're a bad Jew. Again, this is something, Ed Luce was talking about it yesterday when we were talking about his column. This is something that if any other politician had said before, or if they say after, they would be drummed out of politics. But not Donald Trump. His people, his cult just grows stronger.
Yeah, they just but the thing is, they sort of take it on board too. It becomes part of the MAGA creed, which is just. It's a tragic thing, really, for what used to be the Republican Party, and just for American decency. My goodness, to say that Chuck Schumer, who has been one of the most pro-Israel officials, politicians in the country for eons, and who is the highest-ranking Jewish official in the country, and to say that he hates Israel and that he is that anything he says about Israel is angling for anti-Israel votes is just obscene. It really is. But of course, you know, we're used to obscene from Donald Trump. And so we'll talk about this now, and then probably by the end of the show, there will be 3 or 4 more obscene things that he says that would have gotten anybody drummed out of politics 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and that we'll talk about until the next thing. It's that, you know, he goes 90 miles an hour down this road, and it is hard for us and for voters and for the country to keep up and to really process these horrible things that he's saying.
Right. Well, and everybody's numb to it. I mean, again, this is something.
That's the challenge.
This is something that, you know, he said before. But if anybody else had said it, again, they would be drummed out of politics. And we said at the beginning of this year, we're not going to grow numb to it. We're going to keep bringing this up. People can go, well, what are you talking about? Because this is anti-Semitic garbage. That's why we're bringing it up. To tell somebody that they hate their entire religion unless you support their politics or their political party.
It's not a joke.
It's the same thing that freaks have been saying in the evangelical church. Over the past 6, 7, 8 years, a lot of real just freaks and people who really don't understand the Bible at all. Obviously, politics means more to them than their faith. Where the argument is, if you're not for Donald Trump, you're not a Christian. You're not. And it is. I've talked about it before in very personal terms. My mom's funeral, and Tim Alberta told a similar story. I mean, these people are not well. They
No.
are in a political cult, and that's
Very
why Donald
vulnerable.
Trump can say this, get away with it, and why we bring it up, because you could be numb to it if you want. We're not, and America should not. They should understand, even if he does this every day, that this is just foul.
You said even if he does it every day, it's not the first time Trump has expressed similar beliefs. In September, he posted on social media on Rosh Hashanah that liberal Jews were voting to, quote, destroy America and Israel. As president, he also said that American Jews were showing, quote, great disloyalty to Israel by voting for Democrats. And in a statement yesterday, Trump's 2024 campaign manager called the Democratic Party, quote, a full-blown anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, pro-terrorist cabal.
Richard Haas, again, the disinformation spews so easily from their lips and their pens and their word processors. It's almost like, it's almost like Orwell said, fascists are much better with propaganda.
Oh,
and
because it's easier.
they just throw things against the wall. And the Trump camp has said in the past, that Steve Bannon has said, they're going to throw so much stuff at the wall that they're going to numb America. That's what they do every day.
Joe, it's hard for me to listen to this conversation. It's just so offensive for someone to tell me what it means to be a good Jew. It is just, it's so beyond the pale. Let me just say that, but let's put that aside for a second, if possible. I think there's an interesting kernel in this, which is, what does it mean to be pro-Israel? And this association of pro-Israel with Bibi Netanyahu or current Israeli government policy, that's not what it means to be pro-Israel. Governments have been known for time immemorial to do things that are often against their own country's self-interest. We have done things in the United States. People opposed the Iraq War or Vietnam, you name it. It doesn't mean you're anti-American. It just means you have questions about the wisdom of the policy, whether it's in our own self-interest. So what Chuck Schumer did the other day, what I tried to do the other day in the Wall Street Journal, to be critical of Israel, it means to be critical of Israeli policy. I actually think that's pro-Israel. I actually think in the long run, that is something that's good for Israel. You need to have people pushing back, questioning. The government of Israel is not perfect. Bibi Netanyahu, God knows, is not perfect. So this whole idea, if you're critical of Israeli policy, you're somehow anti-Semitic or anti-Zionist or anti-Israeli, that's just nonsense. And we've just got to be straight up about it and not give the Trumps or anybody else ownership of that argument. Indeed, I actually think what Bibi Netanyahu is doing, what this Israeli government is doing, and we've talked about it on this show, is bad for Israel, and it's bad for the U.S.-Israeli relationship. And people who care about Israel, I actually think we have the obligation to call them out on it.
Yeah, and that's what we've talked about before. Jonathan Lemire, you look, I often quote the Wall Street Journal editorial page positively, but you look at this headline, Democrats turn against Israel, and you read the body of it, and again, it's a very dumbed down, simplified approach. There are those of us who have supported Israel for our entire lives, I would say adult lives, but this goes all the way back to me being a young kid and being in church. We always have supported Israel, but the suggestion that you have to support Bibi Netanyahu, you have to support policies that deliberately undermine the possibility of there ever being peace in between Israel and the Palestinians, the idea that you have to support total war at a dense space where we understand, I guess. Maybe the Wall Street Journal editorial page doesn't understand it in this case. I guess other people don't understand it. But there is a cost, and it has nothing to do with Michigan, or I think they brought up Nevada. It has nothing to do with what happens in 2024. It has a lot to do with what happens in 2029, 2034, 2044, Israel's future. And this lie, and I said this yesterday, you just have to put it out there again. This lie that if somehow Israel doesn't do a carpet bombing of Rafah, that Hamas will spring back to power? I spent this weekend talking to people across the Middle East, to foreign policy experts, and I had one question. The question was the same. Is Hamas ever going to be in charge of Gaza again? Everybody said, no, that's over. Their best hope, their only hope, is escaping the tunnels and getting the hell out of Dodge. They will never, ever regain power in Gaza. And this argument somehow that they are is ridiculous. You have a lot of Arab countries that want to come in and help the United States and help them rebuild. Now, unlike Bibi Netanyahu, they have always seen Hamas as bad actors. They have always, unlike Bibi Netanyahu, they would not have turned a blind eye in 2018 to Hamas's funding or sent his Mossad chief to Doha, as he did a couple of weeks before, with the instructions for Qatar to continue funding the Hamas terrorist group. That's what he did. That's what he's done. And they're defending Bibi Netanyahu and saying that Chuck Schumer is somehow not strong enough in his pro-Israeli positions. I mean, we could go down the list of what Bibi Netanyahu has done to make Israel weaker, to make them open to that attack. But again, the focus now is on a Senate majority leader instead of the prime minister who allowed all this to happen.
Right. Hamas may not rule Gaza again, but if there is that carpet bombing campaign, it's going to radicalize more people who live in Gaza, making life that much more dangerous for Israel and the West. And certainly no government is infallible. It's a sign of patriotism at times when you criticize your own government, even as you love that country. And people who do love Israel, whether they live in Israel or live abroad, do have the right to say, look, I love this nation, I love Israel, but I disagree with this particular government, this particular prime minister. And you know who is doing that? President Joe Biden, who is a significant Zionist, who has been pro-Israel for his entire political career, who comes of an age where U.S. support for Israel was completely reflexive. He still feels that way. But he also now believes that Netanyahu is self-interested, is trying to prolong the war to remain in power, and is conducting it the wrong way. And that's why we've seen this break. That doesn't mean the president doesn't support Israel. He does. But it's about Netanyahu.
So Judge Engoron says that he wants this $350 million within 30 days. Now, I know that you're planning on appealing this, but you've still got to put up the full amount pending that appeal. Does Donald Trump have that kind of money sitting around?
Yes. I mean, he does. Of course, he has money. You know, he's a billionaire. We know that.
I don't know. That might not be true. Was that is a lawyer Alina Habba? I don't think she's got that right.
Well, I mean,
unless, he comes up with the money, he has it sitting around. But
there are a lot of billionaires that wouldn't have that kind of money sitting around on their side tables.
Well, they have things. They have things. So anyhow, Donald Trump's attorneys now say he cannot secure the roughly $500 million bond for the civil fraud judgment. They asked a judge yesterday for an emergency stay, claiming a bond for the full amount is, quote, a practical impossibility after reaching out to 30 companies. Trump and his company need to post the full amount by Monday to prevent New York Attorney General Letitia James from being able to collect while he appeals, which could include seizing his assets. While Trump claims to be a billionaire, he does not have the liquidity to pay the bond himself, as the New York Times points out. Most of his net worth is from the value of his things, his real estate, which bond companies really accept as collateral. So let's dig into this. Joining us now, investigative reporter for the New York Times, Suzanne Craig. She won a Pulitzer for an exhaustive 18-month investigation into former President Trump's finances that debunked his claims of self-made wealth. Also with us, former Deputy Chief of the Criminal Division for the Southern District of New York, Christy Greenberg. She's now an MSNBC analyst. Good to have you both. Suzanne Craig, just curious, are there any other avenues Trump could use to pay this? What do you... with all the research that you have done into his finances, what do you think could happen here?
Right. You know, the filing does sound dire because you can't come up with the cash. And what was made really clear yesterday was that they need cash. They're not willing to accept buildings. So he, in the next week, has got to find it. You know, there could be a last-minute sale of a building where he comes up with the cash. Somebody could offer it to him in a transaction. I mean, that's sort of something that will be a taxable event and will, I think, be pretty headline grabbing. But I think there's still some options available to him. I wouldn't say this is a closed story until, you know, we're right at the deadline and we, you know, he makes a filing just saying, I can't pay.
Right. Like a family member? Could a family member, like Jared, with the money that he received from abroad, could he pay?
I don't know if he could through that specific fund, but that's certainly one option. And if something like that happens, I think, you know, this is all new territory, so you don't want to say anything for certain, but I think we're going to have some transparency into where the money came. But if, let's say, a family member came forward, that would be considered a gift or a loan, and there would be tax consequences to it that would cost him. But so far, we haven't seen that. I don't want to say for sure if that was going to happen, that we would know about it already. But so far, that hasn't materialized. And he's in a situation where a number of companies have just said, we're not willing to go near a appeal bond of this size, and we want cold, hard cash.
Wow.
So Suzanne, first of all, there would be quite a few billionaires that wouldn't have this cash laying around, wouldn't be liquid. That's one. And two, let me know if you agree with that. And number two, Donald Trump's problem right now, if he did have to sell some of his properties, commercial real estate post-COVID has just been pummeled and continues to go down. So he would be selling distressed assets, wouldn't he, or assets that certainly are not at their highest level?
Well, I think, A, not at their highest level, and B, not an ideal circumstance. This is really tough to close a transaction on a major commercial building in a small amount of time. You know, I keep thinking about one particular building that could be a possibility. He has a 50-50 venture in Las Vegas with a fellow named Phil Ruffin, who is a big supporter of his. There could be, we could see a sale like that where Phil Ruffin buys him out of that tower. I don't know if that would get him to the magic number, but those are the sort of things I'm thinking that just may be options that they're looking at just to get that cash together quickly. That may not even be an option. Sort of just one of the things I've been thinking at as I've been looking at his portfolio and what could be sold in a short amount of time to meet this. But it's a lot of money. Most people don't have that sort of money sitting around. And keep in mind, he already had to come up with cash for the E. Jean Carroll bond. So that's already put a squeeze on what resources he has available.
So, Christy, he's got about a week's time to do this. From your perspective, how do you see this playing out?
Well, one thing Donald Trump is asking for is to just pay $100 million and not pay the full amount. But he cites in his brief a number of cases to support that. They're all federal. None of them are New York State cases. There is nothing in the New York State code that says you can pay some, 25 cents on the dollar for this, or that you can, because there's a monitor's oversight, that somehow that should change the analysis. By the way, wasn't being completely forthcoming with the monitor as it is. So I don't see him legally being able to get out of this. He can appeal all he wants, but if he wants the judgment to be stayed, he has to put up the full amount.
So
Donald Trump says that any Jewish American who votes for Democrats hates their religion and hates Israel. The 2024 Republican nominee made those comments yesterday during a podcast interview.
Why do the Democrats hate Bibi Netanyahu?
I actually think they hate Israel.
Yes.
I don't think they hate him. I think they hate Israel. When you see those Palestinian marches, even I'm amazed at how many people are in those marches. And guys like Schumer see that, and to him it's votes. I think it's votes more than anything else, because he was always pro-Israel. He's very anti-Israel now. Any Jewish person that votes for Democrats hates their religion. They hate everything about Israel, and they should be ashamed of themselves.
I mean, Chuck Schumer has spent Donnie Deutsch, his entire life, the victim of anti-Semitic tropes because he has been such a fierce defender of Israel. Now suddenly Donald Trump decides that he again will determine, Donald Trump will determine who is a bad Jew and who is an enemy of Israel. Your thoughts?
I think out of all the things that Donald Trump has ever said that have offended my core, this is it. How dare you, Donald Trump, tell me what it takes to be a good Jew and not be a good Jew, and what it takes to love Israel and not love Israel. First of all, you stand for nothing what Judaism is all about being a decent human being, about being kind to others. You are the farthest thing from what anybody should say what a good Jew is or isn't. And make no mistake about it, for anybody who says, I'm voting for Donald Trump because he's automatically good for Israel, he would turn on Jews in a second. This is a guy who has a fondness for Hitler, according to his ex-chief of staff, John Kelly. This is a guy who said there's good people on both sides of Charlottesville. He would turn on Jews in a second if it was in his best interest. I know this could be very controversial. He doesn't care about Israel. He cares about Donald Trump. And how dare you tell me what it takes to be a good Jew or not?
Yeah, Jen Palmieri, there's no doubt how deeply offensive these comments were. But as Mika just read, this is not new. This is something he has done for a long time. He has revealed himself to have these biases, these prejudices, and to defend those who have done unspeakable things, like in the wake of Charlottesville, as we played that clip a moment ago. But yet, nothing he says seems to shake his core supporters. And more than that, nothing he says seems to draw criticism from high-ranking Republicans who are trying to cling to power on Capitol Hill and elsewhere.
They just, there is, I remember when earlier in the hour you all were talking about when he came down the escalator in 2015. And at the end of that campaign, I spoke with a consultant from one of the losing Republican primary campaigns. And he said, in retrospect, we all lost, every other Republican lost the race when he came down that escalator and said, that immigrants coming over from Mexico, some are rapists and criminals, and some I suspect are very good people. Something he just said again about, that's always the qualifier, because he was speaking what people the base saw as the truth. And even though it was an ugly truth, they thought that he had the courage to do that, and then they're willing to if he's willing to defend them on their worldview, they're willing to defend him on anything that he says. And I thought it was a great way to encapsulate what the appeal is and the connection that Trump has to his base, and it persists 8 years later.
Latest article for the Daily Beast entitled, Who Will Win the Biden-Trump Double Haters? You write in part, quote, so-called double haters might be the most important voting bloc this year. In case you missed the memo, double haters are voters who don't like either Donald Trump or Joe Biden. Despite polls that clearly show voters are frustrated with Biden, it's also hard for me to imagine that he can evoke the intense hatred inspired by other candidates like Hillary Clinton or Trump. What is more, it's probably easier to stay mad at Trump. Not only are his words and actions more egregious, they're also harder to avoid. Matt continues, regardless of who ultimately wins or loses with the double haters and the election, the rise of this cohort is significant because of what it says about the sad state of modern American politics. And I would add to that, very loud, echoing disinformation coming not just from Donald Trump, but all the different branches of our society that he has working for him.
Right. And you do have, Matt, for that reason and many more, you have these so-called double haters. And I'm with you. I've always been fascinated by people who used to target Nancy Pelosi for 30 years and Hillary Clinton for 30 years and now AOC and all these other people. And I kept wondering, how are they going to do this, Joe Biden? Like, this guy's like, he's this guy from Delaware that was criticized for being too easy on banks and credit card companies and corporations over his Senate career. How are they going to turn him into some left-wing monster and beast?
Crime family.
They've somehow managed to do that. And so you do have these double haters, which really goes to how, as you said, the rise of negative partisanship, which now really defines so much of our political system. But in this case, you are so right. Explain how the winner of this election will be the person who gets the so-called double haters, more of that vote to vote for them.
I think that's exactly right, Joe. And part of it is just the sheer size of double haters, right? Every 4 years, we obsess over undecided voters. You know, how are the undecided voters going to break? Well, traditionally, undecided voters are like 10 or 11% of the electorate. These double haters are double that, right? It's about 19%, about a fifth of the electorate are people who are dissatisfied with either Donald Trump or Joe Biden. So I think very clearly, as go the double haters, so goes the election. My personal bet is, as we were alluding to there, that, you know, if it's a binary choice, if voters are forced to choose between Trump or Joe Biden, I think that redounds to Biden's benefit simply because I think it's easier to hate Donald Trump. And at the end of the day, forced to choose a binary choice between Biden and Trump, a lot of folks will just hold their nose and vote for Biden kind of as the lesser of two evils. But, Joe, where this gets messy, and if you're Democrats, where this gets scary, is the proposition that it won't be a binary choice, that there'll be a third-party candidate who runs like in a battleground state. We know it's about the Electoral College, right? It could be Jill Stein. It could be RFK Jr., Cornel West, somebody who gives these double haters an out. They don't have to vote for Biden or Trump. They can go with a third option. And I think that's what Democrats have to take very seriously.
Matt, what do we know about these voters? I mean, I have seen some of Sarah Longwell's focus groups where some of the double haters go the way you're suggesting and sort of end up with these are people who voted for Trump twice and end up on, you know, leaning towards the Biden side. But are these people who voted for Biden in 2020 and therefore he needs to win back, or are the people maybe, you know, are they old Trump supporters? Do we have a sense of who they are?
I think, first of all, one question would be, are they like independents? And I think that most of these folks are people who did vote in the past for Biden or Donald Trump. In the case of Donald Trump, I think that it was probably January 6th that was the event that pushed many of them away from the Republican Party. They were willing to stick with Trump through a lot of things. But January 6th, I think, was a bridge too far for many of these double haters. In the case of Joe Biden, I think it's probably a lot of young voters who, frankly, feel, you know, there's the age issue. Obviously, there are things like inflation, other issues, the border. But whatever the case may be, these are not, I would say the majority of these folks are not people that are like the undecided independent voters. These are folks who previously voted for one of these two. They just need to come home and be given a permission to come home. And that's why I think the third party possibility is very dangerous. And again, I think it's probably the third party is probably more likely to hurt Joe Biden disproportionately.
All right. The Daily Beast's Matt Lewis, thank you very much. And Donnie Deutsch, thank you as well. We appreciate your insights this morning. And Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama was asked directly about the misleading anecdote shared by Senator Katie Britt in her State of the Union response. In her speech, Britt linked a graphic account of a young woman victimized by sex trafficking to President Biden's immigration policies. And she's used this anecdote several times before. As we've discussed, the abuse actually occurred during President George W. Bush's administration nearly 20 years ago, and in Mexico, not the United States. Here's what Senator Tuberville had to say about Katie Britt's remarks.
Yeah, well, that obviously didn't go over too well. I would think that our leadership would have vetted that a little bit more, because I would imagine they helped her with that. But that's a mistake made, but it was a good point of emphasis of what really goes on from the border. And I think that's what she was trying to get over more than anything.
Wow. Jonathan Lemire with friends like that, right?
There's always been a great rivalry of senators from the same state sort of sniping at each other. There's active dislike among some. McConnell and Rand Paul perhaps tops the list. But this is one where Senator Tuberville certainly didn't have her back, and managed to throw leadership under the bus while he was at it. I mean, certainly Senator Britt, as we've talked about, is impressive in other ways. In other interviews, you say, well, gosh, if she had just delivered her rebuttal like this, we wouldn't be talking about it right now. And instead, this is, at least for now, going to be the first part of her political resume.
Well, I was going to say she obviously has been seen by a lot of people in the Republican Party as very impressive up-and-comer. And Jen, I know you can confirm. And it was fascinating to see this as I got into politics, that often it's senators in the same party who can't stand each other. There's always this fierce rivalry on who's like the top dog in the state. Whereas I often saw Democratic senators and Republican senators from the same state, or a Democratic governor or a Republican senator, they get along very well. But yeah, you really saw this with Tommy Tuberville, who I'm sure was irked that Katie Britt's star was rising as quickly as it was.
Yeah, he's he's either second fiddle to Alabama versus Auburn, or Katie Britt, versus Tommy Tuberville. Right, because this is what they all say. The other party is the opposition. The real enemy is within your own party. But, I've heard that even though she got panned and, by Republicans as well as just sort of, the media, that Trump still really liked her performance. I think what I had heard is that his team had a role in creating her and drafting her remarks. But I watched all of Trump's remarks in Dayton on Saturday, and he brought her up and said, she kind of got panned. I thought she did really well. What did you all think? And there was yay, very light, not a very big reaction from the crowd for her. Trump also had Kristi Noem with him. It's like a real life apprentice trying out his running mate. I have to say, I have some things to say about her that would detract from her, but she spoke briefly, did a really good performance, got a great reaction from the crowd. So it may be all things that he's taking into account.
And her smile looked great.
Looked great, Meeks. Looked great.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, her teeth just sparkling.
Where's that from? What is that from?
Her smile looked so good. Thank God.
Who said that?
Well, Kristi Noem. She did a commercial on dental work that she had done. And you could get close-ups of inside her mouth when you watch the commercial, which is,
sweetie, are you watching?
I just don't want to see inside her mouth.
Cable on other networks?
No, actually, we brought this on our show.
Did we?
Sure, because she did a commercial for a mouth-fixing doctor in Texas. I mean, it was very weird. I don't get it, but she looked fantastic.
Well, if she looked good, that's good, right?
Cheeky
that's
smile.
what you want.
Yeah, I need
good smile. I need that.
Joining us now, senior Washington correspondent for Bloomberg News, Saleha Mosin. She's the author of the new book entitled Paper Soldiers, How the Weaponization of the Dollar Changed the World Order. Congratulations on the book. Thank you for coming on the show. So tell us about the book, and I take it has a lot to do with the U.S. Remaining at the center of the global financial system, or not.
The book is about the U.S.'s superpower status around the world, how we rose to this status, and how the dollar has underpinned and actually expanded that status, and how there are foreign threats, of course, that we all talk about and know about, and how there are also internal threats that are damaging U.S. democracy, therefore our dollar, therefore our economic prowess abroad.
So let's talk about that. We've heard through the years, back in the 80s, we heard that Japan was going to overtake us. Their currency would overtake ours. We heard the same thing about China starting in 2004, 2005. It hasn't happened. Why has the dollar remained so resilient, and why has it remained the foundation of America's or the world's global system, economic system?
You're absolutely right, Joe. Every generation, every decade, there is someone out there thinking that another currency could come and supplant the dollar. Like you said, in the 90s, it was Japan's yen. In the early 2000s, there was the euro, newly sort of created and came on stage. More recently, people talk about the yuan or Bitcoin. The U.S.'s dollar is a national treasure for the country. It needs to be protected. But first, you have to protect our democracy. The U.S.'s global standing, our economic power and heft is all driven by the strength of our democracy. We have rule of law. We have free and independent agencies. We have free and fair elections, and all of those things come together and imbue a lot of trust from foreign governments, foreign central banks, foreign investors in our country to invest in our growth and invest in our dollar and our treasuries market.
So congrats on the book. You just detailed some of the potential threats to the dollar's supremacy. What would be some others, though, beyond the challenges to democracy, which you just laid out? What are some other things that could actually endanger where it stands now?
John, one of the more obvious ones are the constant fights over our federal deficit and our debt ceiling. The deep partisanship is also not good for the U.S. dollar, because if you have this much partisan and the country looks as if it's coming apart at the seams, then how are you going to have the kind of bipartisanship that you need in Congress to actually address the deficit? The last time that happened, lawmakers and the executive branch had to come together and agree on something. The sky is blue, grass is green. Those agreements don't exist right now. Right. And we're so far from that real talk about bringing down the deficit doesn't even exist.
And how is that seen in global markets across the world? I mean, I've been warning about the debt for 30 years, and pretty much at some point you start feeling like you're Chicken Little saying the sky is falling. But when I started, we had a $5 trillion debt. Now we have a $34 trillion debt. At what point does the rest of the world say this is too much of a risk? The U.S. is carrying too much debt.
Well, that's just what it's going to take. It's going to take other people to point this out in a very real way. One of the fun things that I got to do in the book was I interviewed every living Treasury Secretary, except for one, who was quite elderly, and Bob Rubin. When I sat down with him, we talked about how in the 90s, when he helped the Clinton administration, Bill Clinton, put together an economic agenda, bond traders punished the administration for a plan that allowed for too much fiscal spending, more than the economy could sustain. I have a great chapter that is called Vigilantes and Bullies, and it talks about how bond traders, markets bullied Washington to bring not only rein in fiscal spending plans, but actually start managing the debt and bringing that down. That's the last time any politician, any administration, and the legislative branch has actually addressed the deficit. Now, fast forward to decades later, Rubin says it's going to take markets to bully Washington to do this again.
Yep, and of course that decade, famously 4 balanced budgets in a row. There was that moment, and Bob Woodward first noted it in one of his books about the Clinton administration, where Rubin brought Bill Clinton the bad news, and Clinton's response was, "Do you mean my GD White House is going to be basically hostage to bond traders?" And Rubin's answer was, yes, it is.
Oh boy!
I can't wait to read this book.
The new book
fantastic.
Is entitled "Paper Soldiers: How the Weaponization of the Dollar Changed the World Order." Senior Washington correspondent for Bloomberg News, Saleha Mosin, thank you so much, and congratulations on the book. We appreciate your coming on this morning.
Our abuelos.
Insulin that costs $35.
Or hundreds.
That is the difference between Joe Biden
and Donald Trump.
For women, the freedom to control our own bodies, or doctors going to jail for an abortion.
This is the difference
between Joe Biden
or Donald Trump.
Only one choice is right.
And the difference between them is your vote.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
That was a new ad for the Biden-Harris campaign from the Democratic National Committee. It's part of an overall push by the president's re-election effort to reach out to the country's Latino communities ahead of November's election. Joining us now to talk about that effort, Democratic Senator Alex Padilla of California. He's a member of the Biden-Harris Campaign National Advisory Board. Thank you very much for coming on the show this morning. So tell us more about this ad rollout and the strategy here.
Yes, well, good morning, Mika. Greetings from the West Coast, where it's 230 days till the election, but never too early to start this community-by-community outreach nationwide to Latino voters. We know how critical Latino voters are going to be in determining the outcome this November. And boy, do we have a story to tell as the ad begins to showcase the difference, the contrast between the Joe Biden record the last several years and the failure and tragedy of the Trump administration. Latino families are absolutely better off under President Joe Biden, and we're going to be working through grassroots organizing, through digital strategies, of course, you know, the typical ads that we hear and see every election season, and really amplifying the voices of local elected officials, local community leaders, local civic leaders in every region of the country to reach out to Latino voters.
And are there certain regions of the country where the challenge is greater, and why?
You know, we take no voter and no community for granted, which is why this is a national campaign. You know, when you hear of an initiative like Latinos con Biden, which, by the way, Latinos are with Biden because Joe Biden has been with the Latino community, not just during his 3+ years as president of the United States, but throughout his career on all the issues we care about and all the issues that impact our community. But we know that predictably people will think, well, maybe this is just relegated to California, Texas, New York, maybe Nevada, Arizona, swing states, things like that. But the Latino population is growing significantly nationwide, the second largest population in the United States, and growing tremendously in places like Georgia, where there's more than 1 million residents in Georgia, including a lot of voters that could sway the election. A growing population in North Carolina, a significant Latino electorate in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, another battleground state. You can look at the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania. You know, Pennsylvania also is not one to be taken for granted. So the initiative, Latinos con Biden, is going to include a lot of endorsers, a lot of community leaders that we're going to be announcing over the next several days in every part of the country.
Senator, it's Jennifer Palmieri. Good to see you. There's some measure of Latino voters that are undecided. There's some measure of them that have said that they're going to vote for Donald Trump. I assume the campaign wants to try to persuade those voters to move over to the Biden column. What is the best argument that you all are putting forward for how President Biden has earned the support of the Hispanic community?
All right. Well, first, just to level set with this intelligence audience that's tuning in, there was the same concerns about 2016, and it did not happen. Same concerns about Latino support shifting away from Democrats, and that did not happen. We're not taking it for granted. We're going to go out and earn the votes. As I mentioned earlier, we're 230 days from the election. This is not parachuting into any community 2 weeks before the election saying the stakes are way too high. The stakes are high, but we're starting months and months and months, even before the Democratic conventions this summer, to get the message out, begin the organizing before we get to the mobilizing and getting out of the vote. And again, the message couldn't be clearer. You want to reduce cost of insulin? Joe Biden got it done. Donald Trump doesn't even care. He's trying to cut your access to health care and health care services. We talk about community safety. You know, under President Biden, we passed the first bipartisan legislation to tackle gun safety in more than 30 years. Donald Trump wants to give away more guns, not be smart about gun safety. Look at the numbers in terms of the economy. Record low unemployment, including in the Latino community startups, right? The entrepreneurs starting small businesses, record growth under President Biden. So yes, our communities are much better off. We have the story to tell. We're going to tell it, and I'm confident that we're going to see that translate into the results at the ballot box this November.
Democratic Senator Alex Padilla of California, thank you for coming on the show this morning.